Well, happy New Year 2020, everyone, and welcome to episode number 70 of the CRM MVP podcast. You know, every time we go into a new year, people think about new beginnings and starting something new, something they have been putting out for, the last, who knows, many years in some cases or months in some cases. And, last episode we talked about New Year resolutions, and it was kind of about that. It was about what can I complete in 2020? And also, I feel that, over the last few months here in the U.S., we've been going through this presidential debates and stuff, and you see all these candidates talking about, here are the first things, the first accomplishments I would have if I was president. And I've seen that a lot of times before, where people would, essentially talk about, here are the first things that I would do the first day in office. I would do this, or if I ever get that job, I definitely would implement this change on whatever I do. As I was actually having a conversation a couple weeks ago, with a friend of mine about, if we were to acquire a specific company, and I'm not going to say which company it was, but it was non-Dynamics. It was outside the technical, or I would say technology business. Here are the changes that I would implement if I were to acquire that company. We like to play that because the friend I was talking to is also an entrepreneur. He owns a bunch of businesses. Actually, he's very successful, and I own, this practice, Elevate Solutions. And, we like to talk about, as an entrepreneur, what are some of the changes that we would make in companies that would perhaps be able to perform even better. And I love to have those conversations, kind of like talk about business. So, every time I see something like that, here are the changes I would implement, here are the things that I would do in 2020 or whatever it is, I started thinking about perhaps starting a new series in the CRM MVP podcast with people, other MVPs, and giving them an opportunity to essentially list the things they would do if they were starting on a specific, position. And in my case, I started thinking about, well, what would I do if I all of the sudden became the program manager for something within Dynamics 365? So if I had to put a title in this series, I would say it's what would you do? So what would you do if all of the sudden you were tasked with field service, let's just say, or with flow, or with, anything. Just pick whatever feature it is, portals, whatever, right? If you were responsible for that, if you were the owner of this thing for Microsoft globally, what are some of the things that you would change or implement? Now, some changes and some, angles you could tackle is, I will get rid of these things because you think they are useless or not very useful, features and functionality or whatever it is. Like if you were, the owner of Dynamics 365 as a whole, would you get rid of Dynamics 365 on-premise? Is that something that you would implement, right? That is kind of the angle that I wanted to explore. So for this first episode in the series, I said, well, what is one of the things that I've been struggling with over the last few months in terms of a project? And I'm kind of working on a couple of super complex projects right now that give you kind of a little bit of a headache when it comes to organizing security in a way that makes sense. And even though, as you know, because of episode 19, where I talk about how I set up security, I like to keep it simple. There are some projects that are pretty challenging, right? One that I'm working on right now is a project where they are talking about giving access to outside vendors, right, to Dynamics 365, not just through a portal, but giving them actually licenses to access the functionality. And depending on the vendor, they actually want to change what a vendor can access. So some vendors can only see, let's say, accounts and contacts. Then some other vendors can only see, let's say, work orders and field service. So it's not a one size fits all. So I've been struggling with security. And because I had that in mind, I said, for the first episode of this What Would You Do series, what about if I became the program manager for security? And I don't know if that's even a position, within the Power Platform team or at Microsoft. But if I all of a sudden found myself as the PM for security, what are some of the changes that I would put in place? All right, what are the top 10 things that I would do if I was the PM for security? And this is it. All right, so for number one on the list, the first thing I would do is I would separate activity permissions. That this is one of the things that I think most of us that have been working with Dynamics for years would love to have, right? This is one thing that should be a no-brainer. It should be in the system. I don't really like the fact that we are grouping all of the activities into one. If you go to security roles, you just see activities listed, I guess second after accounts within security roles, which means that all of the activity entities, whether it is all of the out-of-the-box ones, which there's about 12 of them, right? Again, activity entities are appointment, phone call, fax, email, task, all of those things are activity entities, plus any custom activity entity you create. So if you create a custom activity entity, as you know, when you create an entity, there's a chance for you to say this is an activity entity. It would also be governed by the security that you set on security role within the activity line. So because of that, you run into issues. For example, I don't think we're going to be sending a whole lot of faxes anytime soon. So I would like to remove visibility or access whatsoever to the faxes entity, right? To the faxes activity entity. Or pager. I think there's another one called page. Like there are some activity entities that shouldn't even be there. Or what if I want to, let's say, only allow people to see their phone calls, but see anyone else's tasks or something like that, like a different kind of activity, right? Right now, we cannot do that. We cannot apply one permission to one entity versus the other. So because of that, the first thing I would do, which I think is an easy one because we've been waiting for it for so long, and there's a couple of ones on the list that will fall under that category of waiting for so long, is I would separate activity permissions. That would be number one thing I get done on day one in office as the PM for security. Number two is I would like to expand on the actions that we have available within security roles to perform with an entity. So as of now, if you remember, and I'm going off the top of my head, I'm not cheating on this one. You have create, you have read and write and delete. I think you have append to, then share and assign. I think those are all of the permissions. Maybe I'm missing one, but I think those are it. Those are them. But there's a bunch of other ones that we don't have access to that I would love to have on the list. I would love to give people the ability to deactivate, for example, right? What if I don't want someone to delete records, but also I don't want them to deactivate records? And because you have all those buttons at the top and security controls the UI elements, I would love to be able to just take away deactivate permissions, and that takes the button away. Kind of the same way delete works. If you don't have delete permissions, you don't see the delete button. So that works pretty good. I would love to have deactivate. I would love to have export to Excel. I would love to have email links, follow and unfollow. Whatever it is, like all those buttons that I have UI elements for should be things that I can turn off or on or make them work, at the user level, business unit level, parent-child business unit level, or organization level, or nothing, right? I should be able to manage them the same way I can handle the create button, the same way, or the new button, I guess, the same way I can handle the delete button, the assign button, the share button. All those buttons are handled by the permissions I set within the security role and those actions, for that specific entity. So I would love to have, for any button that we have up there, I would love to have an action that I can set to the user level, except for perhaps the administrator buttons. Like, if you're within a view, you will have the view designer or the view editor button in there. Like, okay, we don't need to have a view designer button, or whatever within the security role. But for the regular actions like export to Excel, perhaps even run workflows, I don't know. Like, I just want to have a bigger list. And I know that this perhaps would mean that you have to reimagine or re-engineer the security roles editor, which we've had for I don't know how many years now. I don't know if it was in CRM 1.0. I started working with CRM 3.0. So I don't know how long we've had this thing, and it hasn't changed almost at all. Like, there's a couple of new options that were added that mainly work for the government cloud, I think. I don't think they do anything on the private cloud, or the public cloud, which I'm not really sure why they're showing, but whatever. Like, there's really not a whole lot of changes. I think, they added, obviously, when BPFs went through an overhaul, we now have a business process flow tab, which is great. And, all of those are not bunched up together with the custom entities. But also when you look at custom entities, you see all these custom entities from Microsoft solutions are in there too. Like the field service entities and stuff like that are there. Maybe we should have like a Microsoft Solutions tab. So maybe that security role needs a little bit of an overhauling. But for sure, if we're going to allow people to, modify these other permissions, like deactivate, for example, is a big one, then we have to rethink how we're doing security roles. And I don't know if it's kind of one of those things where I have the idea that we have to redo it, but I don't really have the ideas of how. I would have to rethink on how that works, but Microsoft has people that are way smarter than me and they can figure it out. I'm just saying we need, if I was, if I was the PM, I would definitely go into the people in my team and I would, let's brainstorm this thing, but we need to be able to figure this out. So that's kind of my second, focus for my second day in office, I guess, as the PM for security. Number 3 is I would like to expand the scope options within security roles. So as of now, as you know, we have none. We have user, business unit, parent-child business unit, and organization. So we have those 5 options when it comes to specifying scope. And as you know, the scope is, what records can I perform this particular action on? So let's say your action is write, which is edit or modify. It's the same thing. So if you have write business unit scope level, then that means you can only modify or write to records that are owned by people within your same business unit. So that's how that works. That's what the scope works. But I would like to see that expanded. I would like to see it expanded to include teams, so owner teams. So you can have a level, and I don't know if that would be between user and business unit, and I don't know where you go from there, because you're kind of like, one slice of the pizza is user, and then the next one is half a pizza is business unit. So I'm not really sure how you would do this one, but it's team members, right? So can I do anything? Can I do this action? So write, for example, on any records owned by anyone on the teams that I'm a member of, right? So that goes beyond business unit, because if we have one business unit for the entire company, which is perfectly fine because we're not segmenting the data, but you happen to use, let's say, 3 teams to split the users in different teams or offices or divisions, then you could say, even though we have one business unit, I want to be able to do that for any records with people in my division. That would be a great addition to the scope level. And by the way, as convenient as team member would be, I think that if there's a relationship between manager and user, the way we kind of handle it with hierarchy security today, it should be a little bit more flexible. So for example, if you look at hierarchy security, in hierarchy security, you have essentially, I think it's read, write, append, and append to permissions to records that are owned by people you manage by default. So if we enable hierarchy security, it works like that. And then any non-direct reports to you that are below you, meaning they report to maybe people you manage, you have read-only permissions to their records. So let's assume you have, read, write, append, and append to records, to your own records, right? And now we enable hierarchy security. Well, now you will have those permissions to records owned by people you manage, but read-only for records owned by people they manage and people below. So that's how hierarchy security works. Why wouldn't I have, or one of the things that I would put in place is an easy way for you to say, I want to allow that on anyone in my management, hierarchy. So anyone below. I'm not really sure if it makes sense to kind of stop at the direct report level. If I'm a VP, there's a chance that the regional directors below me don't really have a whole lot of records. I want the chance to access and perform tasks to the people they manage, which are actually the salespeople below. So, hierarchy security is great, but because it's baked in a way where you have this set of permissions for direct reports and read-only for indirect reports, it's not really flexible. So I would like that flexibility to be added so I can decide whether my permissions will, keep going down or stop or whatever. I want to be able to do that. So I think those two are kind of related. It's all about teams, right? It's all about teams because they're managed by the same person, or teams because they're in the same division. So that's where they're all kind of bunched up together or grouped together in number 3. All right, number 4 would be, I would like to put in place an easy way to understand what I call the resultant set of permissions. So if you have a user and that user has 3 security roles, and that user is part of a business unit, and that user is a member of 3 or 4 teams or whatever, I would like to really quickly see what are the effective set of permissions for this user based on all of that. Now, Dynamics 365 already calculates that in a cache, a security cache that contains essentially what the users can do. So it will be really awesome to have an easy way to see that, right? An easy way for me to run a report and have something that spits out that kind of looks like a security role, but that it would give me, this is what this user can do. After we analyzed all of the security roles they have and the team members they're assigned to and the security roles that are assigned to those team members, we can tell you that that particular user can create accounts for anybody and read everybody's account and delete, like whatever it is. I want to be able to see it super quickly. What is the resulting set of permissions? There's really no way to do this today. The closest way to do it, I guess, so the closest thing would be the user permissions tool from the XRM toolbox, in which you can actually, say, what permissions does this user have against that record? So you can pick, let's say, an account, and then it will tell you that user can read, write, delete, whatever. It will actually tell you, and to what scope, what level, it will tell you. But you have to do it on a one-by-one basis. You have to pick a user, and you have to pick a record, and then it will tell you exactly what it is. But I would like to see like an aggregate result for a specific user or for a specific team, right? User or team. They're both security principles. They both can own records in Dynamics. So I should be able to pick either one and get the resulting set of permissions. If I run it for a team, it should tell me, anyone who's a member of the team will be able to do X plus whatever other security roles they have assigned to them. If you want to find out, then pick that person and run it against them, and then I'll tell you exactly what that person will get. So an easy way to see a result set of permissions would be number 4 on the list of things that I would implement if I was the PM of security for Dynamics 365 and Microsoft, or CDS as well. All right, number 5 is I will like the parity with the security kind of architecture of NTFS and other Microsoft solutions. And more specifically, I would like to see explicit denials, right? Which is not something we have in Dynamics today. We only have implicit denials, which is you give them that none, scope. And because of that, you're kind of, and I explained this on my classes. I said, implicit denials is like not inviting someone to a party, right? They shouldn't show up, but you didn't tell them not to come. It was an explicit denial. So because of that, there's a chance that by being a member of a team or somehow, right, even if it's shared with them, somehow that person could gain the access that you specifically gave him none for, right? So for example, if I give somebody read permissions to opportunities, right, and they can only read their own records, let's just say, that's it, then there's no way for me to prevent them from seeing other records, because another user with read permissions and share permissions, hopefully, will be able to share that record with a different user. And then that user will be able to see it. Now, you might be thinking about this and saying, well, why would I want to prevent that? Like if a user wants to share a record with someone else, why would I prevent that? Well, there are situations, and earlier I was talking about how this customer wants to bring vendors in. There are situations where you want to, no matter if it was on purpose or by mistake or whatever, no matter what, I want to make sure this user cannot see any records that he or she doesn't own. There is no way for you to do that today. There's just no way that you can for sure know that. Now, you could say, well, I can set it up so it's read-only and no share permissions for anybody, no, teams or anything like that. Okay, you can set up security in a way that the Dynamics will be useless then if all you want to do is block a specific group of people from doing something. We shouldn't have to, kind of compromise the flexibility for other users just because we need to explicitly deny someone or a group of users the ability to do something. If you say, no matter what, I need to make sure that these users cannot share stuff. Like right now, there's just no way for you to explicitly deny anything in Dynamics, and I would love to have that ability. I would love to have it. I don't know. Maybe add another scope and the circles will be red, where now it says no matter what, like this won't. I don't know. I cannot envision the UI, but explicit denials should be an option. Maybe have a checkbox next to the header of the action where you can say no sharing or no what. I don't really know how. In NTFS, like if we just go and see how they do it there, they literally have an allow and a deny column, and you get to pick which one you want. So maybe that's what we need. We need an allow column with a green and yellow circle and a deny column with a red circle, right? Where you can say allow at the user, deny for anything above that. I don't know. Like it has to be a combination, but I think that we need to have explicit denials introduced in Dynamics 365. Now, most of you have figured out a way to get around it. I've certainly have figured out a way to get around it in over 200 implementations now. But man, there are several projects that I have to make compromises on and essentially convince the customer they don't really want to explicitly deny something simply because it's literally impossible to do it. Right? So it shouldn't be that hard. We should be able to do it. We can do it in other Microsoft software out there. Dynamics shouldn't be an exception. So again, a lot of these on the list can be also counted or added as part of CDS and model-driven applications. Obviously, Dynamics 365 apps are model-driven apps anyway. So these are not exclusive to Dynamics 365. I'm talking about CDS and the Power Platform as a whole in this episode. Number 6, security roles at views and charts. And right now we have the ability to specify which security roles will have access to an app. So if you create model-driven applications, we can actually pick security roles that will have access to that specific app. You can actually pick security roles at a dashboard, which is the latest addition in Dynamics 365, which is great. So thank you, Microsoft, for doing that. So now you can say only these specific security roles will be able to see this system dashboard, because with a personal dashboard, you can just share it with whoever you want. So there's no need for the security role, but the system dashboard filtering by security role capabilities, welcome, like for sure. We really need that, but we want it expanded to views, and we want it expanded to charts as well. We have it in forms, and I think forms were the first one that received that treatment, where not only you can create multiple forms, but now we can filter the forms based on security roles. And after that, we had the ability to do it at the business process flow level. So business process flows can be filtered by security roles as well. So we have the ability to see that at forms and business process flows and dashboards, and we should have it in views, system views, and system charts as well. So, and maybe make it by default all, right? So when I create a system view, by default, it's visible to everybody. And then I get to pick if I don't want certain security roles to be able to see that. It will be so much greater when it comes to, for example, applications where everyone might be on the same app, same model-driven app, and I don't have the ability to select it at the app level, because I know some of you are probably yelling at at your phone like crazy people on the train, telling me that, well, you can put the views on an app and then filter the app with security roles. Well, I shouldn't have to do a workaround to reach something that we know is possible with a single button in a bunch of different other places like forms and business process flows and dashboards. So adding that button to the view editor and the chart editor shouldn't be that complicated. So we should have it. It's actually already on the solutions editor. If you're working on the forms section within an entity, that's where the button is at, right? The security role filtering button on the form level. Just keep the same, little button on the views and charts. And obviously, I know we're transitioning everything to the designer section within Power Apps. So, now that you're working on that, that will be the perfect place to add that little button and let us filter by security roles at views and charts as well. Number 7, and by the way, let me expand for a second in number 6 because, I think it might be too much to ask, but since I'm the PM of security, I can ask whatever I want. So, I would say expand the ability to pick, at forms and business process flows and dashboards, at also, adding views and charts, but expand that to teams as well. So be able to pick teams or security roles would be great. You also, by the same token, on the field level security profiles, right now you can only pick a user, or you can pick, a security role or a team. Like I should be able to pick anything really. So user, security role, or team should be options anywhere in the system. I would say that perhaps for a form, I can't imagine you creating a form for an individual user. Like maybe in some projects you want to have a form for like the CEO or the VP of sales or the whatever, like, the chief something, chief operating whatever officer or chief information officer or whatever. You may want to have a form just for that individual, but it's not very common. At least in the projects that I've done, I don't normally get a request that says, this specific user needs their own, form or whatever. It's typically a team. It's not an individual thing, but at least have the ability to filter it at the team level would be awesome. So adding that to number 6. All right, so let's move on to number 7. Number 7 is I would like to limit advanced find to what's available in the app that you're using, right? So if I'm using let's say the out-of-the-box apps like the Sales Hub, when I go into advanced find, I shouldn't be able to search for, let's say, work orders, because work orders within field service are not part of the Sales Hub. Or I shouldn't be able to go and look at custom entities that haven't been added to the Sales Hub. I shouldn't be able to, I should be limited to what's on the app. And obviously that needs to expand to custom, apps as well. Why? Because one of the things that I love to do with custom applications, with model-driven applications, is create applications for a specific office or division or whatever it is, which is why they were created, which is thank you. Like I applaud that. I love that. I love the app designer. I love creating custom apps. And when I create a custom app, one of the beauties of it is that I can tell what views should be available for a specific group of users, for example. So I can say, for the California app, I'm going to make active accounts in California, and I'm not going to even show active accounts. Like I'm not going to show the active accounts view. I'm going to take it off. I'm going to only show active accounts in California. That way that's the view. But people can still go to advanced find and literally remove that filter and access everything else. So I feel that if we could somehow compartmentalize the results of advanced find to anything that's included, the filters and functionality that is included on an app would be awesome. So not going out of your boundaries, not going out of, the entities that we have added. So because on the app, you get to pick, what entities you want. And the weird behavior is, I don't know if you guys have tried this before, but if you have, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't have an entity on a specific app, you can use Advanced Find to search the records and you're going to get the results. So let's say you created a custom entity called warranties or something like that. If you go to the Sales Hub, you can open Advanced Find. You can say, I'm searching for warranties. And again, imagine the warranties is a custom entity and it hasn't been added to the Sales Hub. So no entity, no views, no nothing. Now you go to Advanced Find, you go to warranties, you say, find me all active warranties. You get a bunch of results. When you double click on it, nothing happens. It's the weirdest thing. So you find records right now, and then you try to open them, and they don't open. So then people complain about it. It would be so much easier if we just limited the results of Advanced Find to whatever the users can see on the app by default. Not based just on security, but based on what's in the app, right? And again, this could be a setting, within system settings or within the app settings. So right now in the app settings, we have two things. We can set up a custom URL, and you can pick a specific security role or one or more security roles to have access to the app. That's it. Those are the only two things we can do. Can we add one more setting that says limit advanced find functionality to anything that's outside this app, or something along those lines. So something like on the personal options we have detail, or I forgot the other option, detail or simple, I think it is the options for advanced find. Something like that, advanced find mode, and then it says something like I want to have limited, whatever that is, visibility, and essentially limit what people can find. That would be such a huge help, because right now customers or users love the idea of custom apps for different divisions and stuff like that, but completely get their high hopes and expectations crushed when they ask the question, well, but can they use advanced find to search for the other records that we're not giving them access to? The answer is always, well, yes, if they have the security permissions to do that, they can. And that's when, that's such a buzzkill, right? It would be awesome to have that, and that's why this will be 7th on my list. And by the way, I don't think that these are like one per day. I feel like I would just call a meeting at 9 a.m. the day I become a PM with like everyone, in the company, everyone at Microsoft. Come into the meeting, and I'm gonna just put this list on the board and say, like, just go. I want all of these for yesterday. Let's do it, right? So that would be my list of priorities, and just assign a different person to every one of these and make it a competition for like a gift card or something, or whatever. I'm just saying these are equally important, all of them. All right, so it's tough to put a number on it. Like, what's more important, number 10 or number 1? I don't know. They're all important. They're all 10 on my list of importancy. Is that a word? I just invented importancy. There you go. You learn even new words in this podcast. Okay, number 8. Number 8 is the ability to switch tenants at the Power App Designer level. Right now, we don't have that. And I know that Microsoft mentioned that this might be an enhancement in the future, but right now it's killing me. And the reason for that is because, with Azure Active Directory, you can actually have trust between domains that are external to you. In other words, if I'm working with a customer, the customer doesn't have to even create a user account with their domain and give them to me, and me having to keep track of the passwords and all of that. No, they can just say, look, I trust elevatesolutions.com. And if elevatesolutions.com, which is also Azure Active Directory, says that that user provided the right username and password, then that's fine. I'm going to trust that, and they can log in into the tenant with their own credentials. I love doing that. I love the fact that when I go to a customer's instance or whatever it is that I need to do, I get to provide just my regular Elevate Solutions, credentials. And if I'm already logged in the browser, let's say I'm using Chrome and I'm already logged in, it's passed through. I can be in my company's, instance, and I can be in my customer's instance, all with the same user account. Love that. Love the fact that Azure Active Directory allows you to do that. The problem with that is that there's no tenant selector on anything that has to do with Power Apps. You can change the actual instances, so you can go from production to sandbox or whatever it is. You can do that. You can change the environment, but you cannot change tenants. So whenever I try to go to, let's say, make.powerapps.com or something like that, it defaults me to Elevate Solutions, and I cannot get to the customer side. I cannot create flows. I cannot deal with CDS. I cannot look at, when are they going to get upgraded? Anything that has to do on the Power Platform side, I'm totally blind to it. It doesn't matter if they make me system admin or whatever it is, administration level. It doesn't, global admin. They can make me anything. I cannot get to it because I, by default, get automatically pushed into the Elevate Solutions, instance and tenant. And the same thing happens with XRM Toolbox, by the way, and the XRM Toolbox team is aware of this. They're waiting on Microsoft to kind of enhance the security functionality to make it work, which is right now, if I have a customer who has trusted me again with my own credentials, if I go to XRM Toolbox, I cannot add them. When I log in, it says, no, who are you? No, you're supposed to be Elevate Solutions. Why are you trying to reach this customer? No. XRM Toolbox just flat out follows the fact that Microsoft doesn't allow that to happen on the Power Platform side. And it's not their fault. They want to make it happen. I talked to Tanguy, and he said as soon as Microsoft enables it, XRM Toolbox will support it immediately. So I'm kind of stuck. I have to ask customers who have been doing this with other vendors, like they do it for other software and stuff like that, and they are sort of like, well, what do you mean the Power Platform doesn't? No, it's like you can access Dynamics and do anything in there, but not the Power Platform. Like, isn't the Power Platform even newer than Dynamics? And anyway, it's just you lose face with the customer, and I think this should be something that it's added, pretty much immediately. So the ability to switch tenants at the Power Platform level is, eighth on the list, but like I said, it's as important as the previous 7 that we've talked about so far. All right, we're flying through this list. Number 9 is the ability to replicate permissions with natively integrated solutions to Dynamics 365, like SharePoint, like Power BI, like Exchange. All of those things, all of those applications we can natively integrate with Dynamics 365 should have the ability to synchronize permissions. Now, I'm not sure how many Power BI MVPs or pros out there listen to this show. I don't want you guys sending me, angry letters to the CRM MVP podcast office. I know that with Power BI, and Ulrich has talked about this before, the CRM chart guy. I know that with Power BI, if you're using direct SQL, you can query the security table and kind of use or implement security. I shouldn't have to do all of that. I know that there's a way in which you can kind of sort of get exactly the respect of security between the two the two systems, but it shouldn't have to be that way, right? Power BI is made by Microsoft. Dynamics is made by Microsoft. Like, why can they not talk to each other? Like, Dynamics and Exchange talk to each other. These two should be able to talk to each other, right? Now, I get it. Power BI is not an extension of Dynamics 365. Power BI can take data from anything and give you the same results, whether they're coming from Dynamics 365 or they're coming from Excel. It doesn't matter. It will take the data and apply all of its power to give you that business intelligence solutions that you're looking for, right? That Power BI works that way. So you could say that, look, Power BI works the way it works regardless of the source. And because of that, we don't really care or follow Dynamics 365 permissions. But come on, guys. Like, if we're pushing customers to adopt Power BI and to be able to get away from SQL SSRS reports and kind of the old way of doing things, I want to make it simple. It's another one of those awkward conversations with a customer where you have to explain that, oh yeah, by the way, once we synchronize the data, it's kind of like Power BI data at that point, which means that the Dynamics 365 security doesn't matter. And no, like that's unacceptable in a company where I'm the PM of security. So that needs to change. And by the same token, SharePoint should be the same, right? I should be able to synchronize this too. If you don't have access to a record in Dynamics, you shouldn't have access to that records documents in SharePoint. It's as simple as that. I should be able to synchronize these things. If you only have access to, let's say, records from other users in your business unit, then you're going to have access to documents from other users in your business unit. These two systems should talk to each other, should work together. They've already been working together for years and years and years. I don't remember when the native integration with SharePoint was introduced, but I assume it was either CRM4 or 2011. Like, that was like 10 years ago, right? That this thing was added. And you can't even say that, well, that's kind of impossible to do. Like, there's a technical... No, there's companies out there that sell the solution to actually synchronize these two. You can get a third-party solution that would literally do what I just said. It will talk between the two systems and say, I'm not going to show documents for records that the user cannot see in Dynamics 365. It literally does that. It works that way. Well, I shouldn't have to get a third-party solution. And I know some of those companies are really good friends, and I love their product right now. I use it in a lot of implementations because I feel that this is a must-have in a lot of implementations. But at the same time, even though I love those guys and those companies, this should be native, right? Maybe Microsoft should acquire those guys and make them even happier. But we need to have a parity, a synchronization between these solutions. SharePoint, Power BI, OneNote, whatever it is, they should all talk to each other. They're all created by the same company. I realize that perhaps in the past Microsoft was a little bit disconnected between the teams. It was kind of like the Office team was working on their own thing and the Dynamics team was working on their own thing, and hopefully the two kind of work with each other, but they weren't really working as a team. But with the introduction of relationship insights, for example, where you can see what two teams working together can do, and in that case was the integration with Exchange and Dynamics 365, I think that Microsoft has changed for the better. 2019 was their best year ever, and I think this is one of those situations and one of those areas where there can be massive improvements, right? Where you can, maybe it's a setting where you say, enhance integration, and you enable that, and then security will also talk to. I don't know how this will be completed, but I think that it makes sense from the Dynamics 365 perspective to be able to say, look, you need to respect. And now you're bringing into Power BI something from a third party that we might not understand, like you're connecting to some proprietary CRM system that you created on top of SQL. Well, okay, I don't understand it. That's your CRM system. I cannot respect a security of a system I've never seen. You created it yourself, so I have no idea. I get that, right? But it's a third-party system. It's not a Microsoft system. Dynamics and CDS are made by Microsoft, so we should be able to integrate. And perhaps this is one of the selling points. Perhaps this is one of those things where you say, look, if you implement Dynamics, we will respect Dynamic security because we made it. We understand how it works. But if you use something else, we're not going to understand it. You bring it into Power BI or SharePoint or whatever, we don't understand, who can see or cannot see what or whatever. Like, we just don't follow it. But if you use Microsoft, you can. Right now, if you use Microsoft, you cannot. You have to get a third party or something like that, or a workaround, right, with Power BI, and try to make it work, because it doesn't work natively. It doesn't work simple. It's not simple. So you have to, I would put that in place for sure and have them talk to each other, replicate security between each other. And I don't know if this should be a two-way thing where you can say, if you don't have access in SharePoint, let's say your permissions are not set right and you cannot see any documents, then, in Dynamics, you cannot see any records. I don't know how far it is. I think I'm open to debate and understanding which one it is. Perhaps is some of those situations like we have with the synchronization with Outlook, where you get to pick, whether the fields are synchronized from Dynamics to Outlook, from Outlook to Dynamics, both ways or no ways, something like that. I don't know if you guys have seen that, where now we can control the flow of data between Exchange and Dynamics, and you get to pick which fields from activities like appointments and phone calls and tasks, contacts, and also emails, like which fields go back and forward. You get to pick them. So maybe something like that, where when I'm integrating with SharePoint, I get that UI that says, how do you want security to be synchronized? From Dynamics to SharePoint, from SharePoint to Dynamics, both ways. They both have to align, or none, which is the way it works right now. None. Something like that will be useful, but let us choose, right? Don't kind of force the none on us, which is, what's been happening for 10 years. So I'm on a campaign for the synchronization of these two or more systems together when it comes to security. And I'm just talking about security because I'm the PM of security, right? What would you do if I was the PM of security? There you go. That's what I would do. All right. Last on the list, this episode is coming to an end. I would like to add, as part of my last mandate as the PM of security for Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform, I would like to add some user level security controls, or I guess capabilities, within model-driven apps. For example, I would love to be able to pick a user from within, setting security users. I'll be able to pick a user and hit a button and reset a password, right? And right now, I have to go to Office 365 to be able to do that. The thing it's not complicated. Look, if you go to admin.microsoft.com, boom, you just drop into the admin section and you can reset a password there. It's a few more steps. It's not as easy. But the reason why I don't like that is because, training is more extensive because you have to show them how to use Office, which is not hard. The Office administration side, like if you don't understand, if you think that's too difficult, you shouldn't be a CRM admin to begin with. But at the same time is another UI, another thing that I have to give him permissions to. I have to give him now permissions for, user management or some other there's like, I don't know, like 15 or something like that, different admin types, custom admin types in Office 365. And although I understand that perhaps you have to do that, you have to give them that permission, even if they do it from within Dynamics, because passwords are maintained by Azure Active Directory, which is handled through Office 365. Because of that, you still have to give them those permissions. I just think it makes it a lot cleaner if I can go in one place and do it all. And it might be one of those, again, settings where I get to enable which one to do. Like, for example, I think it's frustrating that if I go to the user record in Dynamics, there are fields I can change and fields I cannot change. So like if somebody gets married, I cannot change their name. I can change their email for some reason, but I cannot change their name. I have to go to Office 365 to do that, right? It should be a two-way sync. Like if I change it in Dynamics, update it in Office 365, I change it in Office 365, update it in Dynamics. And I realize that sometimes in a lot of implementations, actually, Office 365 or Azure Active Directory is actually integrated with the local internal Active Directory. So you would change it internally on the user record, and then let's say by some system, password sync, ADF, whatever it is, sometime later, because it changes, it could be between 3 minutes or 2 hours, the information will be synchronized to Office 365, and then later on, hopefully, if you're lucky, within a few minutes, it will be now showing up in Dynamics 365. But why make it so difficult, right? Why make it only one way in that sense? It should be updatable. I don't know if that's a word. In Dynamics 365 as well. So, allow me to change all those fields, or at least have a setting in Office 365 or something where I can say, look, it's both ways. So if I update it in Dynamics, then it works, or whatever. Like do it both ways. And then like I said, reset passwords. I would love to have a button to sync users on demand, because right now when you create a user in Office 365, you kind of have to sit back and relax and wait until it shows up, which sometimes happens super fast. Like I've seen it in like 5 seconds, boom, like the user is there. Love it. In some cases, it's like, man, I can watch like 2 entire episodes of Narcos on Netflix while I wait for my user to synchronize, right? It takes forever for some reason. So it would be awesome if we could have like a little sync users, button flow of some kind inside of the users section in Dynamics 365. That would be awesome. I would like to be able to deactivate users or remove their licenses, things like that within Dynamics. I know that all those things are possible in Office 365, but it will be a lot cleaner to have some, like the most popular single action, things in Dynamics 365. Reset passwords, synchronize users right now, kind of like recalculate goals, right? Same thing, like just go and pull information. Like, oh, somebody got married and they want as quick as possible their last name. Bing, just synchronize users, bang, get the last name synchronized. Something like that. Again, deactivate. Trying to think, what other actions you could have, but I think those are the main ones. So like if you want to change their Office 365 admin role, you should do that in Office 365. If you want to add them to a security group, or an office group, essentially inside of Office 365, you should be able to do it in Office 365. If you want to mess with their mailbox or something, like change their email address within Exchange, or give them, some other permissions or whatever, add them to an Exchange group. Like, I don't think those things should be in Dynamics. I think that it's okay, go to the Exchange admin, center to do that. But simple ones like resetting passwords is a big one. Especially if I could do it with like a workflow or something, or a remote trigger of some kind where I can just say, go ahead and reset the password. Especially if I could give my users the ability to do that. And I'm not really sure how I could give them the ability to just reset somebody else, but that might be a permission in Dynamics where some users, like you can reset password from anyone you manage. Like right now, you don't really have that, right? In Office 365, it's sort of like if you have user management or password manager, password admin or something like that, you can reset anyone's passwords, but you don't really get to pick which ones. But it would be great if I can say, okay, you guys can reset passwords for people you manage, or people in your team or your business unit, right? Not everyone, but maybe I get to pick everyone, kind of like permissions to, now that I think about it, maybe these should be on the security roles into user actions, have like a user, actions and miscellaneous privileges, a little section dedicated to user actions like reset password, sync users, and then you get to pick like user level. You can do your own, you can do business unit, you can do teams, because mine will include teams now, which is kind of cool. And you get to pick whatever you want in terms of scope and allow people to do that. So I think that would be the final kind of actions to take place for me as a PM of security. So these are the top 10 things, again, changes that I would make if I became, what would you do if you became the PM of security? There you go. Those are my 10. Now, hopefully, I want to see this expanded. I would love to see, for example, Nicholas Hayduk talking about his top 10 things he would do if he was the PM of portals. I would love to see Eliza talk about what would be the top 10 things she would do if she was the PM of flow. I would love to see, for example, I don't know, Jonas or Daryl Labar talk about what are the top 10 things they would do if they were the PM of the platform and solutions and anything that has to do with pushing customizations from one side to another. How would they improve that side? And I think we can even give Microsoft some ideas about, here are the changes that I would make, because all of these changes, if you notice, everything I talked about in the list is based on a real life problem that I've been having for years, or that I'm having over the last few months with a project or whatever it is. Obviously, I can't say that the ability to switch tenants at the Power App level is something I've been struggling for years, because Power App is not years and years old, but at the same, or the functionality in Azure that allows you to trust other outside domains is not years old. But for the vast majority of these, are some things that I've been wondering for years. Why don't we have the ability to do that? And that's why they're part of the list. So I would love to invite other MVPs to talk about their area of expertise. Maybe Sean Tabor can come in and do one about field service. What he would do if it was the PM for field service, and besides firing Ben Ballmer, what else would he do? But anyway, invite some. It's an open invitation to other MVPs that are working with this thing day in and day out to come in and talk about some of the changes they would make if they got the job as the PM for a specific functionality. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of the CRM MVP podcast. Don't forget to reach out to us if you have any questions or comments at info@crmmvppodcast.com. I do read the comments that you make on our website. So if you go to crmmvppodcast.com into the episodes, you can post in there. I like some, I respond to some. I know some of them are directed to other people, but I love to read your comments. And if you have any suggestions, like if you would like to hear from any MVP out there what they would do if they were the PM of something, I would love to hear some suggestions, because if your suggestions are coming in and asking for a specific MVP about a specific area, I'm pretty sure we can convince that person to come on the show and talk about what they would do if they got the job. So we'll see you on the next one. Thank you so much for tuning in, and hopefully we have a lot of great episodes and things to talk about in 2020. We'll see you then.